Well, hello and welcome everyone to another exciting virtual tour with the Foss Waterway Seaport. I'm your guide tonight, Chris, taking you through the twists and turns of history. And here's the deal. This started as a program about wooden boat restoration, and I'll be honest, it got away from me to a completely different path tonight. So I hope you'll join me on this journey because we started out looking at this one particular boat that's inside the Foss Waterway Seaport today. And I was asking myself a bunch of questions about it. And then it just opened this Pandora's box of information that I felt like we should probably talk about as a maritime institution. So we're going to do that tonight. But first and foremost, we have to acknowledge the generous financial contributions of Columbia Bank, because without them, we'd not be here.
I've been a commercial fisherman for 41 years. Truly is a magical place out there. I've been with Columbia Bank as long as this boat's been to sea. As a commercial fisherman, we have income pulses that are directly related to seasonal activities. If that propeller ain't turning, you're not earning. Columbia Bank tailored this loan to fit our business needs perfectly. They made me happy as a clam at high tide.
I don't care how many times I see that. Every time he says, if that propeller ain't turning, you ain't earning, it makes me happy yet again. So good to see you guys. It looks like everyone's having a good time so far, and I'm excited for us to get into this. So what are we talking about? Let's just start there. AristoCraft. So if you go down to the Foss Waterway Seaport today, you will get to see this 14-foot 1955 torpedo runabout with a 1955 Mercury outboard. And it is, man, it's the missing link for me. When you go down to the seaport, I think you're likely to notice it because it's sort of an outlier down there. When you look at it, it's this little wooden speedboat in a maritime museum that really focuses on a completely different story and narrative altogether. And when I first was doing the research on this, I was like, for sure, we're going to be talking about the boat shop, right? So if you're not familiar, the seaport houses this state-of-the-art heritage boat shop where a team of volunteers works on the restoration and creation of wooden boats. That's their thing. And the wooden boats that they work on, they use heritage techniques for a lot of them. So they want to make sure that they're constructed in the same way that those boats would have been constructed, whatever, 100, 120, whatever, how many years ago. And creating that space where you can actually maintain a legacy of creating boats that way and keeping that tradition and knowledge alive. And that's incredible. It's a huge thing because wood, I'm going to stake my own flag on this conversation, is the best boat material. Boat or ship, if you're going to build something out of it, wood is the best. And yeah, it's expensive and it has its pros and cons, right? Like in freshwater, wooden boats can be a nightmare because you get dry rot and you have a series of problems. Wood in saltwater is absolutely perfect, in my opinion. It's everything else on the boat that suffers from that. But it's an incredible building material. It's naturally buoyant. It's incredibly strong. It makes a good boat and or ship. And so to have this place that maintains that knowledge and legacy is really incredible. And so there's a lot about wooden boat restoration that we could have really gotten into. But the more I was looking at this 14-foot torpedo from AristoCraft, I started to think, like, why is this so important? And why does it feel simultaneously out of place down here on the floor and at the same time exactly where it needs to be? And when you look around just at what's down there, right? So this is the AristoCraft torpedo as it is down there with the woody. And that was the thing, right? So the woody car back here is almost more in place, I'm going to make the argument, than this AristoCraft, because this is an outlier. It's something that completes the story of boating in the Pacific Northwest. And so I'm glad it's there. Because when you look around, right, all the other boats that are featured down here really focus on Tacoma and Tacoma's story. And there are fishing boats and pleasure boats and runabouts and transportation craft that have been used historically down on the Tacoma waterfront for years and generations. And when you look at them all, they're like, oh, there's some commonalities to them. They're mostly made out of wood. They have this large open design. They can accommodate quite a few people. This is one of the Foss rowboats, I believe, here that was created actually in Tacoma. You can look at the Paulsbo boats that are right down here as well. And they had something in common with some of the original AristoCraft. So take a look here. Atlanta Boat Works is the origin story of AristoCraft. They started manufacturing the AristoCraft boats in 1946, following this guy named Claude Turner's return from service during World War II. And that is unbelievably quintessential to this entire story tonight, is that a guy who builds wooden boats comes back from World War II and starts creating these craft for people. And this is what they look like in the beginning. And in 1946, they bear so much resemblance to the kind of boats that you would traditionally see right down in the Foss Waterway Seaport. They've got that utilitarian look to them. And that's the origin story to AristoCraft, is that they are down there creating these utility boats, these fishing boats, these things for no-nonsense guys coming out of the Depression era who want to do something on the water. And that open style fishing boat was replaced in 1947 with the models that AristoCraft is now known for. And the Typhoon, which is a 12-foot, two-seater runabout, was introduced. So you go from this, right? This is the original AristoCraft utility created in the 1940s. And then pretty much 1 year later, you see a transition to something more like this. So these are the racing runabouts that AristoCraft has made. And in the late 1940s, AristoCraft introduced this bullet-nosed boat called the SMU. And really that heralded the era of the 1950s AristoCraft, which engineered a lot of new additions and revolutionized the way that boating was done. And you start to see things like the torpedo show up. So the Typhoon and the torpedo, which I think the name alone should tell you where we're going with this, become the benchmark of what the personal watercraft should look like. And there's this huge switch in the narrative from what makes a boat good to what makes a boat good now in the 1940s and 50s. And for whatever reason, it's missing, and I can't figure out what it is about Tacoma where that like missing link, the Bigfoot just disappeared to, because we focus so heavily on sort of the two aspects, right? The commercial side, like tall ships and commercial ocean liners coming in, hauling cargo in and out of Port of Tacoma. Or we talk a lot about the intimate handcrafted wooden boats of this region that are still popular today, like the Willets canoes, for example. But that transition of this type of boat, like the 14-foot torpedo, is quintessential. It changes the way that America thinks about boats. And it happens right here. So when you're looking at it, right, you got the 12-foot and the 13-foot AristoCrafts, and you'll notice what makes these unique and spectacular for the time is the lack of seating. These are designed to be personal watercraft. There's no hauling of cargo. There's no carrying of passengers. Like, this is a showman's boat. This is a performance craft designed strictly for fun and pleasure. And even if you're looking at the ad on the right side there, which, by the way, this 13-foot AristoCraft retailed at the time, 1940s, for $497. Look at how this is set up. Your passengers sit in the front, like they have a front row seat to the excitement of what's going on over here, and the pilot sits in back. This is designed for the thrill and the entertainment of it. And when you're looking at these, this is the original lineup of what AristoCraft was offering at the time. And then this is how they're selling themselves with craft like this. This is the 1956 13-foot Sea Flash, which was introduced, which had a flashy 2-seat design, raised cowling, and fins. So they're really leaning in the late 50s to this like Cadillac speedster, sexy wooden boat design. And varnish was getting phased out for epoxy coatings. And this is the transition phase, right? Because after this, the 15-foot Avalon enters the scene. And then you start to see more and more of this transition into fiberglass. But there was this glorious boom of the wooden boat from the mid 1940s until the late 1950s. And it was made super popular by the AristoCraft design of their gear steer. So what sets them apart is that they have a customized fabricated gear steer system, opposed to the original like pulley and cable system that you often see with boats, especially in this era. And I tried to find some advertisements about it so that you guys could see what I'm talking about here. But essentially, it's got these solid bronze gears machined with the nylon liner steering shaft there, so that as you're steering it, you get real tight precision. And then it's got the 1/8 inch steel rod encased in the nylon there as well that goes back. And so you can shift the gears, you can hit the pedal, and you can steer, and it all controls that outboard motor on the back there through this nice waterproof system that is machine precision and high performance. And that's important, right? So you're not taking something out as like a runabout fishing boat anymore. This is something that's sexy. This is hot. This is something that you're going out there like Mad Men style, showing off to everyone. And just look at the ads. Not only do they have the flashy blue and orange, but they're really stressing the fact that this is a modern system. So with that Quicksilver box there with the throttle and the gearbox, it's changing the way that boating is considered altogether. And just going through archives, right? Like if you just look at what boats were popular, you start to see a lot more of this design, the wooden hold racing boat. And like I said, there goes a lot more time and effort into maintaining a wooden boat, but there's a sense of pride in that too now, where it's not just the utilitarian use of wood, but it's something where people are happy, and it's almost like a status symbol to have the wood now. And I don't know how many of you were around when we were talking about the fact that the Woody, that wooden station wagon that's down at the seaport right now, heralded the transition in the opposite direction. That those original station wagons, which get their name from the fact that they used to go from the train station to the estate or the hotel, were made out of wood, almost entirely out of wood, with just the barest metal components that they could have. But it became less fashionable, so they started putting in more and more metal into that. And then it was just like something that people are like, well, I'm going to junk this. And so surfers bought the old ones, and it was like, oh, that's cool, man. You got that old junky wooden thing. But for the boating industry, it went in the other direction, where after World War II, having wood in these boats was perfection. And it was something where it could be made beautifully, buoyantly, and then maintained by these guys who had a real personal connection to their watercraft. And the personal aspect of it is something that I can't stress enough. Like, look at this. This one guy barely fits in the entirety of his AristoCraft here. And so when you're down here and you're looking at this, right, this is the 14-foot torpedo. And this, I think, at best can accommodate 3 people, and 3 people from the 1950s. That's like half a person by today's standard. And when you're looking at these, the 2 things that stand out, obviously, are that they are freaking gorgeous and that they're light. So the classic 12-foot torpedo, which is shown right here, can still be purchased from the Atlanta Boat Company today. And that's something that I think is extraordinary about this story, is that Atlanta Boat Company starts making the AristoCraft in the 1940s, right after World War II, and are still producing them today. So there's something about this that is tenacious, that sticks in the psyche and brings people back. And the fact that you can still buy one of these Atlanta Boat Company boats today for roughly $15,000 is bananas to me. So how did it become so popular? Well, there's three things I think that change boating forever, not just across the world, but very specifically in the Pacific Northwest. And we can look at such a clear example in Atlanta for whatever reason. It just works out this way. But in Atlanta, they start with the production line. This is the first and most important part. So production during those years in the 1940s and 50s was at an incredible high. And the way that they did it is they create a conveyor belt system, essentially, where a chain is pulled through the factory here and drags these pieces of boats through. And that was allowing a boat to be produced, believe it or not, every 15 minutes. And working around the clock, 7 days per week, 20,000 outboard boats were produced in a year there. And so this is a view of that production floor in the 1950s. And Claude, our guy who comes back from World War II and starts producing these, has this theme that gets passed on over the years where the way to do it is to create one model at a time, right? So if they're making, for example, the 12-foot torpedo or typhoon or whatever, that's the only boat that they make. And so they have this long production line on the floor down there where each boat is getting dragged by a chain. And as it comes into your station, you assemble your parts, and then it moves on to the next station, and the next guy works on his parts just like that. And you get to see this creation of boats down there, right? Where basically from start to finish there, I don't know how much you guys can see, they're coming through and just refining and machining each of these pieces. And you start to see the difference in the way people talk about boating in the ads at the time. So this is one of the original ads of the AristoCraft. And what you notice immediately here is that these women are having the time of their lives. There's no fishing going on. They have no time for it. They're out here living at the absolute breakneck pace of life. And it's such a complete difference from like these flat bottom mojeans, which would have been the quintessential pleasure boat at the time. And the pleasure boats of the early 1900s are mixed use. It's designed, A, that you're going to row it under your own power. B, that if you're going to have fun with it, you best be working out there too. So you could use something equally for work or for fun. And even for the strictly like high-end pleasure craft that you would normally see in the Foss Waterway Seaport, like the Willets canoes that we talk about all the time, this is pure wooden boat adoration here. This is the absolute finest construction of the Pacific Northwest, copper nails all the way throughout, stripped red cedar. But this itself isn't designed with adrenaline in mind. This is a canoe. It's utilitarian as it is egalitarian. It's designed to be as easy on the eyes as it is on the water. And like, this is something that you could use for a variety of purposes. But when you're looking at the AristoCrafts, it's even in the name. This was something elite. This was something fun, designed strictly for enjoyment. And so you see this transition from wood as just the utilitarian material to wood as the exciting thing. So looking at the old ads here, you can see how these were getting shipped around. I don't know how that car is attempting to drag all of these boats around. It looks like a Ram commercial out here. But the production was so high of the AristoCrafts at the time that it's like every household could have their own pleasure boat. And you start to see more and more of these ads of just families out having fun after World War II. And you start to see a lot of consistencies in the ad. So this is an advertisement for the 1950s AristoCraft, which if you guys were around for our talk about Chris Craft, which I think Chris Craft is the parallel to this. The same way that AristoCraft was making wooden boats and making them exclusively for luxury, so too was Chris Craft at the time. And so this ad is for Chris Craft here. Let's see. Oh, I'm sorry. This ad is for AristoCraft. This ad is for Chris Craft. And you can see there's a lot of similarity in the two forms of advertising here. And it's making boating purely recreational. It's sexy now. It's not something that you go out just paddling around on the bay for. It's something that you're going to do to get sporty. So I love going sporty for 1940. Here's an ad of the AristoCrafts at the time, and you can see very, reasonable price points, and everything is about the luxury, about the speed and the excitement. And these were still more of these are the Chris Craft ones. These are still very I'm going to say conservative for the time. This is like a family boat that you would take out. But then you see a really dramatic switch to them being exclusively hot. It's the cool thing around town. So much so that in the 1950s, AristoCraft was part of every kid's dream. So the Aladdin Thermos Company, which I think some of you might have grown up with, they made all of the cool lunch boxes from the 1950s up through the 1980s. So He-Man, Ninja Turtles, the Rifleman, all these pop icons of our various youths ended up on these lunch boxes that kids were taking to school. And the AristoCraft Sea Flash was part of this series here. So the Sea Flash, which was produced by AristoCraft, ended up on the thermos for this particular lunchbox. That's how cool boating was now. It was something that could be in any family and all across your lunchbox. It was the same level of cool that Minecraft is for 6-year-olds right now. And you see a lot more of this. So something that also takes its place in the 1950s is the renaissance of water skiing. And water skiing is something that had been around a little bit earlier than that, but it really starts to get popular in the 1950s, which is not a coincidence that that's the same time that you see the AristoCraft and the Chris Craft become the dominant form of boating throughout the area. If people are going to have a boat, it's going to be one of these speedy little luxury ones out there. And so water skiing becomes the it thing to do. So if you go down to the museum right now, in the back of the AristoCraft, they have these cypress garden skis, which belong to Richard Downing Pope Jr., or Dick Pope Jr., as he was better known. And he was the world champion water skier and really established the sport as the coolest thing that people could be doing at the time. And in 1947 was setting trends with everything. Here he is in his prime. Here he is again out at Cypress Gardens down in Florida, making water skiing the coolest thing ever. But believe it or not, my friends, water skiing owes its lifeblood to the Pacific Northwest. So in 1928, this guy named Don Ibsen, that goofy looking guy right there in the middle, a graduate of Seattle's Roosevelt High School, and just an all-around athlete sportsman, invents water skis. And there's some contention, like all things right who invented everything, even the airplane, right? Some people are coming after the Wright brothers on this. Okay, let's all take a breath. There were various forms of water skiing that were coming alive at the exact same time all throughout the United States. But in the 1920s, our boy Don here gets credit for popularizing I think pretty much uncontested, popularizing the idea of water skiing as something that you should be doing for fun. And believe it or not, he's doing that on Lake Washington. So none of these guys, who all are kind of sharing credit for inventing, quote unquote, water skiing, knew each other. But all in the 1920s, these guys on on very cold lakes, might I add, are out creating water skiing. And Don gets the cake for making it the cool thing to do. And it's because he's so freaking charismatic. So in the 1950s and 60s, it just skyrockets. And Don Ibsen, right here, class clown, voted most likely to succeed, creates his own form of water skis and starts selling them like hotcakes all throughout the areas there. And then starts the Ibsen Water Ski Company. And we've got an ad for you guys here of Mr. Don Ibsen selling his water skis, and it is great.
The finest pair on water, starring Don Ibsen, world-famous water skier and water ski official, and Paul Guttleben, performing on Kimball fiberglass water skis, the first water skis molded completely of fiberglass. So, you want to go water skiing? Well, you and some 500,000 other water sports lovers, and the number is increasing by leaps and bounds. It's America's fastest-growing sport. Equipment? Here's all you need to start. A pair of sleek, glass-smooth K-glass water skis. Lightweight, strong as steel, molded completely of the new wonder material, fiberglass. Here we are with Don Ibsen, world-famous water skier and water ski official, as our K-glass demonstrator, ready to make a standard double ski takeoff. Note how Don keeps the K-glass ski tips well up and the rope between the skis as you're off. A few hours practice in the water and you'll be trying stunts like this. You've got to watch out for boys, however. Gulls, too. It's fun to ski outside of the wake from the boat, and if you're good, you can even manicure your fingernails. Now, here's a neat trick. Water skiing with the rope behind your neck. Notice how the skis are always kept parallel and the knees slightly bent. Jumping the wake is fun, too, and easy to do. A little bouncing of the rear with the hands in and out of the water is also effective. You can even walk on the skis. And swinging away from the wake and jumping it is another one of the many tricks you can do with K-glass water skis. How do you return? Simple. In fact, if you're good, you don't even get wet.
Smooth. Way to go, Don. So I'm just checking in the comments here. It looks like I know we've got at least one avid wooden boat aficionado out here who used to service the vintage Chris Crafts, which is awesome. And thank you. You brought up our next big point, right? Yes, it's the power, right? So not only do you see this transition to the smaller, intimate performance like wooden boats, but what is it that sets them onto the major market? It's not just Don here selling water skis. It's the outboard motor. So the outboard had been around since 1903 when another one of our American entrepreneurs and inventors, a guy named Cameron Waterman, fantastically enough, made a machine with an air-cooled motorcycle that had a propeller and essentially becomes the first outboard. But even though production starts in 1906, only like 25 of these suckers were sold. And so in 1907, they redesigned it a little bit more to become a water-cooled engine by Mr. Waterman out there. There's a huge theme coming out. And they sell, a few more, but it's not really catching on in the early 1900s. It's not until the end of World War II that you see this huge resurgence of the outboard motor coming across as something. And it's the development now of huge amounts of power, like 30, 40 cc's of power. And you can see sort of the transition of that outboard evolution actually down at the seaport. So if you've passed by this, if you've ever gone down to the Seaport Museum and seen this and wondered what the heck is going on, their outboard indoor museum section is amazing because it walks you through this transition of the outboard motor to like, oh, that cool thing that allows me to stop rowing so much, to the thing that makes watercraft like this feasible now. So in 1949, the revolutionary Johnson Seahorse model was produced, and that motor introduced almost all of the features found in today's outboard. So like the recoil starter, where you pull that sucker and the removable motor cowl, forward, neutral, and reverse gear shifts, and then a remote fuel tank so your sucker doesn't blow up on accident. And that's all in that post-war industrial boom where the outboard is now the thing. And that's exactly what you're looking at with something like the AristoCraft here. And the Mercury outboard engine is ubiquitous. It's the one that you see on all of these. And so if you look, this is from the AristoCraft historic archives, right? Literal truckloads of Mercury outboards getting brought in. And as soon as they're hitting the shelves and getting mounted to the back of these boats, you start to see things like this. Wow. Look at that sucker right there. This is pure sportsmanship at its finest. That sucker has to be, I'm guessing, what, 12 feet? I don't even know which model this is, honestly. But you can see front row seat for the people in there. They want to feel the bugs in their teeth and the wind whip their hair back. And then this guy also, the one thing that you'll really start to notice from like the 1950s photographs of this is not only is everyone in a wooden speedboat with an outboard motor, but they all have the like captain's hat. I don't know who was shipping these captain's hats out in the 1950s, but it's like you got one as soon as you were the boat. Like, I don't know if the salesmen are like, welcome aboard, skipper. I'm glad to have you here. But it's like every picture, every shot, everyone's wearing the captain's hat. So you start to see this, right? The AristoCraft speedboat is now the thing. And the San Diego first outboard motor drill team, this is now boating. And it happens overnight, subtly, without fanfare, that this guy, this sucker in the background here, just out there fishing, is getting left behind by these sleek wooden speedboats. And like we were saying about the wooden boats early on, there's just something more responsive about them. They handle better. They move through the water better. They like hit the waves in a different way that's almost impossible to describe. But if you have experience with a fiberglass boat and a wooden boat and you go out, you could just tell the difference. And this wooden boat phenomenon kind of flies under the radar in the Pacific Northwest, but it's hugely popular here because of Puget Sound. The thing about wooden boating on lakes is that you have to constantly take your wooden boat out. You have to make sure that it's varnished and well taken care of, because a wooden boat in freshwater is a delicate combo. They don't like each other. But a wooden boat in saltwater, friggin' perfection. You keep a wooden boat in saltwater and you don't have to worry about it drying out. It maintains, it's essentially like pickling the boat, right? It stays in this beautiful condition. The only thing you have to worry about is the various pieces of machinery attached to it, but not with the AristoCraft, because all of those gears are made out of brass, and all the pieces that are made of corrosive metal are under nylon sleeves. So you can take off your outboard, flush it with fresh water, and leave your wooden boat with a light canvas cover down there in the Sound, and it's a recipe for success. So you start to see influx of these recreational wooden boats showing up in the area, and they owe so much of their success to the fact that the idea of the personal watercraft is made popular in the 1940s and made possible by the outboard engine, which you see in the 1940s and 50s. And so tons of things like this start showing up. So this is the last of the wooden boats that AristoCraft produced. This was in 1957. This was the 15-foot Matador. And you can see they were at the like peak of the Jetsons craze, right? They're like, you know what it needs? More fins. There's almost more fin on this sucker than boat. And look at this cockpit. So this is facing the stern. You can see the outboard there. And it's got these like round seats for your guests to be like cupped in the womb of your boat. And then the stern placed steering column, which is right in the middle there, like an orca's dorsal fin, just pops right out and has the steering column there, and then all of the gears and everything set up down there. It's an absolutely wild boat. I've never seen anything like it, but the AristoCraft Matador, produced in the 1957 time period, there is just like, it's like looking at a wooden Cadillac on the water, right? And it draws its origin story from this: the humble 12-foot torpedo, this pure, glorious wooden boat designed for one, where a captain could be in charge of his own destiny. You didn't have to go out with a crew. You didn't have to take anyone. It was your literal saving grace. And people were out on the water, living their best lives. And I love the like green windshield there that feels so just like Mad Men, right? It's got that perfectly. I see this parked outside of every wealthy orchard in Eastern Washington, getting ready for boating weekend, right? And so this is how these are getting sold. They're produced on a production line, ironically, because you can make thousands of them in a year, but they're being pitched as the ultimate luxury item, the individual man's private yacht, essentially. And all of the ads reflect that. It's just one or two people, three if you count the kid, but I'm assuming they don't, as just cruising around in their own little palace, owning the world here. Everyone's hot. Everyone's in charge of their own destiny, and they are true AristoCrafts. So today, even now, Atlanta Boat Works still has their production facility down in Georgia, and you can go and see the complete AristoCraft collection down there. And it's housed in their facility with one of every single boat that they've ever made. And they have a lot of this, of the original marketing materials, all of the old magazines and print ads that they had down there. And they started up again in the 1980s. And originally it was done as a side hobby by a gentleman that works down there named Bill. And they just started up again with production. So this is from their website right now. You can still buy one of these wooden boats produced recently in the original facility for like $13,000, which in the boating world for this seems absolutely bananas to me, right? That's a gorgeous boat, and produced in that historic facility is really something special. So as you go down to the seaport next time, I hope you linger for a moment on this boat. While it's around, it's on loan to the collection right now. And it is, like I said, that missing link to the transition of boating in the area. Before it was all fiberglass bay liners. And in that interim, when it wasn't just wooden oar-powered boats cruising around Puget Sound, there was this moment where boating went from equal mixes of industrial and recreational to purely recreational, and in such a way that it was glorious, it was refined, it was aristocratic, it was freedom in its purest form. And I don't think there's a better example of that transition than an AristoCraft wooden boat with an outboard Mercury engine on it. And that just so happens to be the exact model that they have down there today. So when you see it, which I hope you go down to the seaport and examine it, and hey, every third Thursday is free admission for anyone down there, and they've always got cool stuff going on. Go check it out, and next time you see it, you can go in with a little bit more context there. So if you guys have questions, let me know. If not, thank you. It's always the best part of my week when I get to hang out with you guys. And please come on out, whether it's to the Foss Waterway Seaport or on a Pretty Gritty Tours. It's always good to see you guys in person now. But I do enjoy these moments where we hang out online. So until next time, you guys get out there, keep on exploring, and live like an AristoCraft. I'll see you guys soon. Have a great night.